Hold up. A whole study crowned Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, the most intelligent British royal, and the timeline is still trying to catch up to the significance of that. Let's get into it. Oxford Royal pulled academic records, university rankings, and overall achievements, and Meghan came out in first place. Meghan graduated Northwestern University with a double major in theater and international relations. That is academic stamina. That is real intellectual muscle. And here's the part people skip. This intelligence didn't stay in the classroom. It shows up in her work now. It shows up in her career moves. It shows up in her success as a founder. You can see it in the way she builds brands with intention, how she understands audiences, how she creates products with emotional impact, and how everything she touches has a strategy behind it. Her education didn't sit on a shelf. It became her foundation. Meghan's ranking has stayed viral because it still delivers a message people pretend not to see. She didn't stumble into influence. She built it. She studied for it. She worked for it. She brought that intelligence to every chapter in her life and turned it into impact. So yeah, Meghan being crowned the most intelligent British royal is already iconic. And the way that same brilliance fuels her wins as a founder, that's the storyline I'm cheering for every time.
Well said, Notorious JTB. The funniest part of this whole story isn't even the ranking itself, it's the reaction. Because let's be honest for a second. If this study had put almost anybody else at the top of the list, some people would be throwing a celebration parade right now. There would be headlines, there would be applause, there would be people saying, "See, we always knew it." But because the name attached to the result is Meghan Sussex, suddenly half the internet turns into a team of detectives working overtime. Everybody becomes a professor. Everybody becomes a data analyst. Everybody suddenly has a PhD in evaluating intelligence. It's amazing how fast that transformation happens. One minute people are scrolling social media. The next minute they're acting like they're defending a doctoral thesis. And that's what makes the whole thing so entertaining. Because whether people like the result or not, the ranking wasn't pulled out of a lucky dip bowl. The study looked at educational records, academic achievements, and university credentials. That's how rankings work. You don't have to like the answer, but arguing with the scoreboard because you dislike the player is a different conversation. And let's talk about Meghan for a minute. Before the royal titles, before the headlines, before the documentaries, before all the noise, she was already putting in the work. People sometimes act like she appeared out of nowhere the day she married Harry. Nope, there was a whole life before that, a whole career, a whole education, a whole lot of effort. Anybody who's been to university knows one degree can leave you staring at the ceiling, questioning your life choices. Now imagine tackling a double major. That's not something you sleepwalk through. That's deadlines, that's exams, that's papers piling up like dirty laundry. That's determination. The theatre side makes perfect sense when you look at her career. Communication, public speaking, storytelling, being comfortable in front of an audience. And then you've got international relations sitting right beside it. Global issues, different cultures, politics, diplomacy. It's actually kind of funny how those subjects ended up matching the life she eventually stepped into, almost like she accidentally packed the right tools years before she knew where she was heading. What cracks me up is how some people act as if acknowledging Meghan's accomplishment somehow costs them money. Relax. Nobody's asking you to join a fan club. Nobody's asking you to buy merchandise. They're simply pointing out things she achieved. That's it. One thing that gets lost in a lot of conversations about Meghan is this simple fact. That Northwestern degree didn't magically fall out of the sky and land in her lap. People talk about it like it was some side quest. It wasn't. That was work. Serious work. Anybody who's ever dragged themselves through university knows exactly what I'm talking about. One major can have you surviving on coffee, panic, and whatever snack happens to be closest to your laptop at 2 a.m. Meghan looked at one major and basically said, let's make this interesting. Theatre, international relations, two completely different worlds. One teaches you how to communicate with people, the other teaches you how to understand the world they're living in. That's a heavy workload. That's deadlines fighting deadlines. That's essays arguing with assignments. That's your calendar looking like it got attacked by a printer. And somehow she managed it. What makes me laugh is that some people act shocked when Meghan sounds informed, confident, or comfortable speaking on international issues. Look at what she studied. The clues were there years ago. Theatre wasn't just about acting. It was about communication, reading a room, connecting with an audience, knowing how to tell a story that people actually listen to instead of checking their phones halfway through. Meanwhile, international relations was teaching a completely different set of muscles. Global affairs, different cultures, how countries interact, how complicated the world really is once you get past the headlines. Put those two things together and you've basically built a toolkit for someone who would eventually end up speaking to audiences across the globe. Looking back, it's almost funny how it all fits together. It's like watching the first episode of a show after you've already seen the finale. Suddenly, all the clues make sense. And here's what regular people understand better than anyone. Success usually starts long before the public notices it. People see the finished product. They don't see the years of studying, the late nights, the stress, the sacrifices, the moments where everybody else is having fun while you're trying to finish another assignment before midnight. That's the boring part nobody puts on magazine covers, but that's where achievements are built. That's why Meghan's education matters. Not because it's a trophy to wave around, because it tells a story about preparation, about putting in the effort before the spotlight ever showed up, long before royal titles, long before international attention, long before the endless headlines. There was a young woman investing in herself, learning, growing, building skills. You know what amazes me? Not that Meghan keeps launching projects, not that she keeps building businesses, not that she keeps finding new opportunities. What amazes me is that she manages to do any of it while half the internet is standing over her shoulder with a clipboard. Seriously, most of us get stressed when one colleague sends an email that starts with "just a few concerns." Your whole afternoon is ruined. You're replaying the conversation, you're calling friends, you're staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. Now imagine millions of people doing that at the same time. Every announcement, every interview, every business move, every public appearance. Somehow, Meghan's life became a group project for people who weren't invited into the group, and they all seemed convinced they're the team leader. The funny part is that some critics inspect Meghan's decisions harder than they inspect their own life choices. They'll spend 3 hours analysing a podcast announcement but haven't checked the smoke detector battery in their house since 2019. Make it sense. Because the level of attention is wild. A new project gets announced and suddenly people are examining it like archaeologists discovering an ancient civilization. What does this mean? What's the hidden message? What are the real motives? Mate, she launched a project, not a secret moon mission. Calm down. And yet through all of that noise, she keeps moving. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Most people need encouragement to keep going. Most people need support. Most people need at least a little breathing room. Meghan seems to get the exact opposite. The criticism starts before the project even exists. The complaints arrive before the launch date. The negative headlines are warming up in the parking lot before the announcement is finished. And somehow she still says, "Right, what's next?" That's not weakness, that's not luck, that's somebody refusing to let other people write the ending of her story. What I think regular people connect with is the human side of that. We've all had moments where it feels like somebody is waiting for us to mess up. At work, at school, in business, in life. It's exhausting. Now multiply that by 1,000, then multiply it again. That's closer to what Meghan deals with. One thing people forget is that Meghan didn't walk into royal life as some wide-eyed newcomer waiting for instructions. She already had a life, a career, an education, a resume. She wasn't showing up asking, "So what do I do now?" She arrived with experience already under her belt. That's a completely different situation. And honestly, I think that's part of why she stood out so quickly, because Meghan wasn't bringing the same old conversation, she was bringing new topics to the table. Mental health, women's rights, social issues, opportunity, representation, stuff that regular people actually talk about in their homes, at work, and with friends. Now imagine walking into a place where things have been done the same way for ages, the same routines, the same habits, the same playbook. Then somebody new arrives and starts asking questions nobody has asked out loud before. Whew, that's when everybody suddenly gets nervous. We've all seen it happen. Every workplace has that one person, the new employee who walks in and says, "Why are we doing it this way?" And the room goes silent. Not because it's a bad question, because nobody has asked it in 10 years. That's the energy. Sometimes people love fresh ideas. Sometimes fresh ideas make people clutch their coffee mugs a little tighter. And let's be real, history is full of people who got labeled difficult simply because they challenged things everyone else accepted without thinking. The funny part is that asking questions isn't rebellion, it's curiosity, it's growth, it's progress, it's how things improve. You don't upgrade your phone by insisting the old one is perfect forever. You don't improve a company by pretending every system works perfectly. And you definitely don't move society forward by treating every new idea like a fire alarm. What Meghan seems to bring was a willingness to talk about issues affecting everyday people. Not in theory, not in some fancy conference room language, real things, the stuff families discuss around dinner tables, the stuff young people worry about, the stuff communities wrestle with every day. And naturally, that created reactions, because new voices have a habit of shaking old furniture, sometimes gently, sometimes with the force of a bulldozer. What makes me laugh is how some people acted shocked that Meghan had opinions. Why wouldn't she? She had spent years building a career, studying, traveling, meeting different people and working in different environments. Of course she arrived with perspectives.